limits, man. Whoa. Okay, calm down.
The Vince McMahon story. If
Tell
he
us.
has. So huge story, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. But you've probably heard about this. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal that over the past few years, Vince McMahon has paid out over $14 million in NDAs to employ WWE, not employees, necessarily because WWE wrestlers aren't employees, but WWE, talent, workers, in order to cover up this sexual indiscretions, including what are called a consensual affair, even though it was with the underling, up to sexual assault, alleged sexual assault on a former WWE wrestler. And this is all coming out and it's making some waves, but Vince McMahon is still running the company. He has stepped down from his role as CEO a couple of weeks ago when the first allegations came out. But he's still in charge. He still appears on the TV show, and the reason he can still be so brazen with this is because WWE has deals with NBC. They have deals with Disney. They have deals with Fox. They're a huge mega corporation with huge ties to all these other media corporations. So that's why CNN is one of the only outlets that actually were talking about this on TV, because CNN, owned by Time Warner, hey, they have their own competitive wrestling league. So they're not in bed with the WWE. So they're actually talking about it, even though and it was announced that Netflix was canceling what was going to be a positive documentary on Vince McMahon that they were doing in conjunction with WWE. So imagine these guys, and it was almost finished. Bill Simmons he worked for ESPN for a long while, and he's done a ton of TV and documentaries. He was working with the WWE to do a biography on the WWE and Vince McMahon and tell this ultra positive story about him. And he's surprised, I guess, by these revelations of sexual harassment, sexual assault by Vince McMahon. And my question is, what did you find out when you were shooting the documentary about Vince if you didn't find this out? What was that documentary actually going to be? And of course, we all know it was just going to be for show, the narrative that Vince McMahon wants to tell.
Wow. You want to show a clip? We have a clip. Do you want to show it?
Yes. The CNN clip is pretty good. Yes.
To the art of the follow-up, the need for follow-up stories. 3 weeks ago, Vince McMahon stepped down as WWE CEO following allegations of sexual misconduct. It turns out now there's a lot more to the story. The Wall Street Journal breaking the news this week that McMahon paid hush money, $12 million to women who had made allegations against him. $12 million in payouts. That's a big scoop from the Wall Street Journal. Now there's probably more to come. There's an investigation that McMahon has pledged to cooperate with. But it's a really important example of why there needs to be digging by journalists to get to the fuller story. Let me bring back Claire Atkinson, Lauren Hirsch, and Philip Bump for more on all this. Claire, the WWE is a big media company. People sometimes don't appreciate how important it is in the media firmament. It's a content creation machine. What do you think are the implications of this revelation about McMahon?
Yeah, you'd have to wonder whether all of the WWE partners, whether it's Disney, whether it's Peacock, whether it's Fox, and Netflix also had a biopic of Vince in the works, which I read is now cancelled. What are they thinking? Are they thinking that this is just going to go away? There are, the Wall Street Journal is already on its second story about Vince McMahon coercing a colleague into sex and then having to pay another couple of $1 million to the lady, and then she exited.
Not a colleague, employee.
The question is, does anybody care? This is a brand that operates in the wrestling ring.
Oh gosh, that's cynical.
It's all about bad behavior, right?
This is a Me Too story. In 2017, this would have been breaking news headline news.
Absolutely. So the silence is pretty deafening. You also got to wonder, what exactly is this investigation that the board is doing? The board is made up of Vince McMahon's daughter, Stephanie McMahon, her husband, and also Erica Nardini, who's the CEO of Barstool Sports. So you kind of wonder, where this is really going. Stephanie was yucking it up at the UFC last weekend with her dad.
I appreciate the cynical. You're being a realist, not a cynical, but you're being a realist.
I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, so that's the other twist. Even though Vince has stepped down nominally as CEO, his replacement was his own daughter, okay, who's been his right-hand man for a very, very right hand or woman, I should
Right
say,
hand
for
woman, Leslie.
yes,
Wow,
for a
way to
very, very
erase her.
long time. Another person embroiled in the scandal is head of talent relations John Laurinaitis, who we found out with these recent revelations. Head of talent relations, he's basically the go-between between the wrestlers and the creative team, who basically decide the fate of whether you work or not, whether you're going to be a wrestler or not, whether you're going to be on TV or not. And he had had a sexual relationship with with a wrestler. He was was discovered. He was fired for it. They paid out a million in an NDA, and then a few years later, WWE hired him back into the same role. The same role, and then he did it again. In fact, it was even worse. Vince McMahon literally sent a woman that he had hired basically to have sex with her, as a he basically paid her to have sex and be an employee. Like he hired her as a paralegal, but the Wall Street Journal reveals that she that was just where she was put because Vince McMahon met her at his condo and wanted to pay her to be, I don't know what a non-offensive term you could be, but someone at the office he could sleep with. And then when John Laurinaitis came back to WWE, Vince McMahon sent this woman to his department so that he could take up with her as well. And let me tell you, everything I'm saying right now, this is stuff that's been rumored about and known and talked about in wrestling for years and years and years before all these big WWE deals were signed, before that they planned on doing this documentary series. And if you dig deeper into the history of WWE, especially in the 90s, the original controversy that they had, most people remember the steroids trial and that controversy, but there were other controversy at the same time. For example, Rita Chatterton, the first female referee, accused Vince McMahon on national TV of sexually assaulting her on the Donahue show. She used the word rape, they bleeped it out. That was on national TV. Never been disputed, never been disproven. And after these revelations came out, a wrestler came out and corroborated her story. There was something called the Ring Boy scandal, which is as big as Epstein. There was a announcer who worked for the WWE named Mel Phillips who sexually abused several boys across the country at WWE events. And we now know that there is videotape of this. The FBI literally has videotape of sexual abuse happening at WWE events, which Vince denied. Vince said he never knew anything was going on, even though at one point his father had fired this Mel Phillips for being caught having sex with an 11-year-old in the car in the parking lot at a WWE show. Linda and Vince McMahon hired him back a few years ago, but they told him to cut it out. They told him to cut it out. And you can hear commentary in WWE shows, the actual shows that they show, referencing some of the abuse happening. There was a guy named Ronnie Garvin who was caught twice on camera. There are wrestlers who alive today saying they saw him assaulting someone in the locker room, assaulting male wrestlers in the locker room. And like, this whole story is as big as Epstein, Sandusky, Weinstein, all put together. Is so deep, and all of this stuff is like out there. Some of this has been on TV, CNN, Larry King. You can see clips of Larry King grilling Vince McMahon about sexual abusers in his locker room, and then a few years later, once WWE becomes a publicly traded company, Larry King has invited Vince McMahon on, and he's calling him his friend and
Oh
saying
my
this
gosh.
show is a tribute to the WWE. It's shocking stuff. It's all out there. And sadly, aside from the Wall Street Journal reports, no one's really diving into any of this other stuff. And I want to say all that stuff about Mel Phillips, Terry Garvin, Pat Patterson, all that stuff is stuff that wrestlers say Vince 100% knew about. Pat Patterson was accused of sexually harassing at least a half dozen wrestlers over his time. And Vince McMahon, he stepped down in the early 90s, but he came back, and Vince McMahon basically kept him on until he passed away, even though he was known, like so many wrestlers, came forward and said he did this stuff. And this is stuff that you can find on YouTube. Anybody can find, and certainly any of the companies working with WB. Certainly Disney could find it. Certainly Netflix could find it. I want to mention Blumhouse. They're supposed to be doing a TV show about Vince McMahon and the steroid trial, working with WWE. So like all these media conglomerates, they're so tied in with WWE that they just pretend none of this is happening. But if this was anything else, anyone else, Vince McMahon would be like the #1 news story, and he would be gone, and basically, and his daughter would be gone, and his lackeys would be gone too. It's just a completely horrific story that no one really has put all together.
Wow. Well, thank you, Leslie. It sounds like you just put it all together.
I'm trying. Watch my Twitter feed. I'm writing a couple of articles about it.
Oh, great. Well, thank you you kind of gave us I feel like we were just blessed with a preview of it.
All of that is allegedly, but I can document it. Allegedly.
Right.
I do have to mention Vince McMahon threatened to sue Talking Points Memo and anyone else who mentioned the Rhea Chatterton story. So they're extremely litigious.
Wow. Well, if you are watching the stream now, that's in it. You just saw something great. If you're
Yes,
watching the stream
absolutely.
later,
Allegedly,
and-
hey, I'm a comedian. I hold a comedy podcast. Yeah.
or if there's a big bleep or something, and some kind of fade, crossfade, you're gonna know what happened. We had to cut that out. But I think this is all Leslie. This is all comedy.
Yes.
It's not real. It's like wrestling. It's not real.
Exactly. All
Yeah.
kayfabe. That's the word.
All kayfabe, yeah.